really, when you cut it down, I didn't have any of the skills that you need to run a successful business. I had, no college education. I had a GED, had to drop out of high school because of a chronic illness, and I had nothing. But at that time, I still didn't understand the whole idea of customer service and of retention and things like that. I only knew how to make rough and tough fighters. I was actually talking with somebody yesterday who was the highest performer in their fitness franchise in the entire system. And they had about 300 locations in the system, I believe. I was asking them, like, okay, well, what were you doing? Because they were hitting some awesome numbers. And they said we were literally...
Welcome to the Zero to Profitable Franchise Podcast, the best place for you to come to figure out the right franchise to buy and how to get and stay profitable. My name is Tariq Johnson, and I've bought, grown, and sold multiple franchises and got myself free from corporate America, and now I'm on a mission to help you do that too. Here you'll find some of the most in-depth, profitable franchise secrets, tangible strategies, and specific mindsets to help you create your dream life through franchising. So whether you want to buy a franchise, or you already own a franchise, or you have a business that you want to franchise, then you have found the perfect episode. Why? Well, Keith, my guest, founded a boxing franchise. He built up a successful location from scratch and has successfully franchised his business. But here's the key part. If you are facing an obstacle or a challenge in your life, then this episode will touch you deeply because Keith had to overcome significant challenges in his life. And pun intended, he had to fight for the entrepreneurial success that he's had. Now, this is one of those episodes that we get into the real juicy stuff later on in the episode, so make sure to stick around until the end. This episode is time-stamped, so feel free to jump around as needed. Now, if you want to buy a franchise in the next 12 months, you can check out my free franchise masterclass at buyaprofitablefranchise.com. And if you want to work with me and my team on finding or buying a franchise or resale business, then you can go to tariqjohnson.com/consulting, and we're happy to see if we can help. With that said, let's jump into episode number 18 of the Zero to Profitable Franchise Podcast. Hey, before we jump into the episode, if you've gotten value from any of the content I put out, it's not easy and it really takes a lot of time to create this content. So if you're watching on YouTube, please hit the like button and drop a comment, anything, even a smiley face. It helps the YouTube algorithm show the episode to more and more people. And if you're listening on a podcast platform, please rate and drop a quick review. Both of these things are free and take no longer than 30 seconds. Thanks so much, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Hey everyone, welcome to podcast episode number 18 with Keith Keppner. Welcome on, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Tariq.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm excited for this podcast episode because one, I think for the listeners, your story is unique in that you currently have, a corporate location that you built up from scratch. So outside of being a franchisor, what it's like to kind of be a franchisee and having to had grown your business from scratch. So I do think it'll be really fun to touch on that and what that's been like. And what a lot of people I don't think they realize about the fitness space is that you can be profitable like before you even open your doors. You That's can right. be cash flow profitable. So let's talk about that to start. Most people don't realize that. So how does that process work when someone's opening a location and then, pre-selling and getting membership? What's that like?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the advantage and disadvantage to the fitness industry is that it's very much about marketing and sales. And so there's an advantage to that and a disadvantage to that. And the advantage to that is, like you said, the pre-sale. So if you're opening up a restaurant, I imagine there's really not any such thing as a pre-sale, right? You just have to build up marketing and awareness, community awareness, etc., and then open up and do your thing, have your grand opening. With fitness, we've launched a couple locations at least now that we've been either break even or close to break even or within a couple months making money because of an effective pre-sale. And it's something that we're continually working on as a emerging brand, going so far as to literally make the sales for the franchise partner, which is something, heck, I wish I had when I started my own business from scratch, because outside of the systems, outside of all of that, I didn't have the marketing and sales. And I thought that if I built it, they would just come, kind of like a restaurant. But yeah, that's not good enough in the fitness industry.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that when I first opened up the very first juice bar, that was kind of like a big concern. Like, is this even going to work? Like, we're opening our doors. Are we even going to have customers? And so to me, that's a really cool thing about fitness. And, we'll talk more about your concept of what you own. But the idea to be doing your build out and to start getting customers already and already knowing, okay, when we open our doors day one, we already have this amount of revenue and memberships on the books. And I think it solves one of people's biggest questions, which is like, is this going to work? Will I make money?
Yeah. Well, as you know, in many industries, something that makes a business very valuable are some type of reoccurring, right? So that's where Taco Bell famously are doing their, $10 a month or whatever is membership for like a free taco a day or something. So companies are looking at how they can put that in, or car washes. Actually, recently I was exposed to this information, or I saw it, but I just didn't think about it, that they're doing memberships now. And that's where some companies are getting great advantages in the marketplace, because you sign up for this car wash membership and now you get a discount, and now they have that reoccurring revenue they can count on. And that's what you have with a gym. And then again, like you said, you don't have to rely on people's impulses. You get a chance to tap into their aspirational wishes and wants, and that allows you to sell the dream and then fulfill the dream.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's funny that you say that, because I was in the line for the car wash the other day. I try to go and take our son Caleb, because he's 3 and he likes to be in the back seat when the car wash is going. And I noticed that it was like $10 a month for the first 3 months or something like that. And I thought, oh wow, that's interesting. So yeah, it's a good hook. All right, cool. So tell us about your concept, what it is, and how did you get started doing this?
Yeah, so our concept really is just like every other concept out there with boxing, fitness boxing boutique, but there's one big difference, and that is that we actually teach a curriculum. So think about essentially taking all the great stuff about fitness boxing, right? Clean environment, professional environment, customer service oriented, but combining that with the authentic curriculum and teaching of a martial art, and that martial art is boxing. And that's something that lacks in the marketplace. It's like last week, I did my third jujitsu lesson ever in my life. And I was like, man, I'm so happy we're doing this with boxing, because this is what boxing needs. Because if I were to go to your typical boxing facility to actually learn the techniques of boxing as a combat sport, or at least just to expand myself, I wouldn't be getting it in this really awesome tiered, progressive fashion. It'd be like, okay, hit the bag, do some hits. All right, now you spar, and now you might get beat up. So that's something that we specialize in, is really bringing that martial arts structure, discipline, respect, and organization to boxing. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, one of the things that you were sharing with me, which I hadn't really thought about, and it makes so much sense, is that, so boutique fitness is very popular at the moment. You have all these different, whether like stretch zones or club Pilates or all these different things in a very specific category. And there's all these boxing workouts that are coming out. But, what you were telling me was that, well, all of those other boxing concepts are all about the workout. It's about just getting a good workout. It's not about actually developing the skill set to be able to defend yourself or to be able to really improve your boxing skills. So, are you guys the only one in the marketplace doing this the way that you're doing it?
So there is one other company, it's also emerging, that they do this. I would say, though, where we differ is the lineage of what we teach. So we teach from my father's mentor, who was Chuck Bodak, who worked with over 50 world champions, and including he was the Olympic coach for Muhammad Ali. And his method of teaching and that lineage of coaching was passed down to my father, who fought amateur up in Chicago and also coached professional fighters, and then was passed on down to me. So we teach that long line and lineage of boxing technique, and again, in a very precise curriculum that is, it's not just, you have boxing experience as a coach, come aboard and teach what you know, that type of thing, which I think is what maybe that other model offers. Whereas we have it like, oh, it's a recipe and you follow the recipe. And we prefer oftentimes, more often than not, to get coaches with little to no experience, but they can follow the recipe because we know the recipe works because it's produced multiple Golden Glove champions from scratch and prepare professional fighters to fight on national television.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a big deal. And what's cool is that I found out recently that you have an epic YouTube channel.
Well, I appreciate that. Not as epic as yours, but working at it.
Yeah, it's great. So for anyone watching this who you want to learn some boxing tips, go check out the YouTube channel. Some really impressive videos that I found. So I thought that was really cool.
Oh, it's so cool. Like you've experienced, I'm sure, like how many people you get to impact on that type of platform. We've had, there's at least one individual that comes to mind in Sri Lanka that watches our videos and also has a little facility that he operates. And he's done some of our drills that we've done in videos on YouTube. And then another gentleman in the States somewhere, I think like in Washington State, did a whole video about like our slip drill and recreating that. So it's just so cool impacting everybody.
That's amazing. So how many? Tell us about your system now. Like how many locations do you have? How many are corporate locations? How many are franchise locations?
Yep. So we have 6 locations, and 2 of those are corporate. Initially, only one of those was corporate, and we recently acquired another one that was a franchise. We did a transfer on that one. So, and we started launching in 2020. So right during the pandemic. And it was so funny, I was so blessed to be selling franchises in that time because then people thought that in-person fitness was never going to come back. And they thought you were completely insane, at least a lot of people did, to even be like thinking that was a thing, right? It's kind of like, hey, do you want to buy this horse and carriage? It's like, that's gone. That doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, for sure. So this is what I think will be interesting is that you know there's a lot of franchisors out there where maybe the person running the franchise or at the top, they didn't necessarily found the company and they're just used to, working in the corporate world or their career franchise industry people. But like you started this business from scratch, like you built this from the ground up. So tell us that story and what has that process been like for everyone watching that aspires to be an entrepreneur? One, how does it feel now to have gone from nothing, 0, to getting to this point now, having 6 locations? And what was that journey like?
Yeah, well, and so touching on kind of from the franchisee perspective, when I started in 2013, went out on my own. I was partnered with a couple other different gyms there, and it just, partnerships, if you don't pick the right people, they don't work out. And so starting out on my own, I had none of the skills. I could provide some of the service, all right? Because, I was a pretty good coach and I was progressing as a coach. But really, when you cut it down, I didn't have any of the skills that you need to run a successful business. And so that experience of what that is like and the amount of work you have to go through, the pain, the struggle, the suffering, everything else, and just frankly, the uncertainty. I got a firsthand crash course in what it feels like maybe to be unsupported as a franchisee. And so that's why as a company, we are very strongly committed to that coaching aspect, which is what I'm passionate about, is coaching boxing, coaching business, and that's how it's all plugged together. But so it was a long journey of being fortunate enough and having, serendipity to come across individuals that exposed me to these different concepts in business, different ways to structure the business, better ways to operate the business. And I see this a lot of the time. I was actually talking with somebody yesterday who was the highest performer in their fitness franchise in the entire system. And they had about 300 locations in the system, I believe, at that time. And I was asking them, like, okay, well, what were you doing? Because they were hitting some awesome numbers. And they said, we were literally doing everything opposite that corporate told us to do. And it was like, wow, like, that's not something that I want as a franchisor for a franchisee to do. Now, if it's causing them massive success and to be the highest performer, I have to reevaluate, right? When with advice I'm giving people, right? What type of systems we're giving them, what type of structure and offers we have, and so that's something that I see very troubling, and that's something I'm really passionate about is being a utilitarian, taking what works, doing it, implementing it, and doing it quickly and effectively. And so that's where, starting from scratch, I like I said, I got a neck injury in 2010 when I was boxing in Mexico. I had, no college education. I had a GED, had to drop out of high school because of a chronic illness, and I had nothing. And so I looked at maybe being a lawyer. My dad, who was my biggest mentor, especially at that time, said, hey, look around and see what state still offers you to just take the bar exam to become a lawyer instead of spending time in law school and money in law school. So I looked around. You really can't do that anymore. So I was like, well, darn. And so he's like, well, get into coaching, do that. And so I got into coaching and then started to have success pretty quickly, started developing a little following of fighters and everybody. But at that time, I still didn't understand the whole idea of customer service and of retention and things like that. I only knew how to make rough and tough fighters. And so then when I met my wife, or who would be my future wife and business partner, she'd managed a gym for about 9 years. So I was able to take her knowledge that she learned from that and slowly plug it into what I was doing and crush limiting beliefs that I had and step aside my ego for what I thought I knew or how I thought it should be. And so that was kind of the journey in short.
That's beautiful, man. That's so amazing. I love it. And, sometimes life takes us on a different path than we expect or intend. It seems like it's working out well. So I'm curious to know, in terms of what has worked for you, because you talked about two different things. You talked about kind of the growth side before, about the franchisee who is doing opposite of what corporate tells, right? So let's cover that first. Growing your corporate location and taking over the other location and now having a few franchisees. What do you see is working in terms of how you're being able to get customers and really grow your system? Yeah,
well, that's a great question. So they're probably the easiest, and I know, you're a pretty sharp marketing guy, and so direct response marketing, right? So that's the most bang for your buck, right? If you do a billboard and it's just a regular billboard, it's like not going to do very well. But if you have a specific, opt-in, things like that, and obviously we're blessed now to have social media and Facebook marketing where you can get a very clear picture of how you're doing. So that's where we're finding really that and referrals, right, are the most powerful ways to market any type of fitness business, or I think maybe almost any business. But the key is, and the challenge is when you have marketing agencies, and I'm friends with a lot of people that have marketing agencies that are amazing agencies, and so I'm kind of throwing them under the bus by saying this, but the biggest problem with marketing is that a lot of these business owners, even that are franchisees of a system, they don't have everything else that is needed to turn that lead into a client. All right. So you don't need more leads, right? It's like if you were to start your own fitness business right now, your initial thought might be, well, we need to generate leads. Okay, well, yeah, it's not really quite the problem, or it's only a part of the problem. And so you can have what we've experienced. Was way back in the day before we mastered these systems, we would hop onto a marketing company, they would flood us with leads, and then we'd be like, oh man, the leads are garbage, or oh, this just doesn't work, something like that. Nobody picks up the phone, like these are all fake or something like that. And the thing is, with fitness, it's important to remember, unlike with maybe other businesses, more like a B2B style business, but with like B2C and with things like fitness, almost everybody can afford a fitness membership. All right, that's part of the beauty of it. And honestly, within a certain range, almost everybody could benefit from it. So, it's like we can all benefit from health and increased activities and everything else. And it's all about what's your flavor. So if it's your flavor, it makes sense. And most people can make it happen. And if you structure your memberships in such a fashion, you can make it so you have some wiggle room. But yeah, so getting those leads coming in, but rather getting leads. But then you got to get the leads scheduled, and then you got to get them to show up. And then you got to sell them, right? And obviously, number one thing is providing excellent service. If you don't provide excellent service, you're not going to sell them. But you can provide an excellent service and do what we did for years, which was just say, okay, bye, we'll see you later. Hope to see you soon. And they walk out the door, versus approaching it from that coach mentality of like, if you're my fighter and we train one session, we're going to talk about what we're going to do next and when we're going to do it next. And that's how you need to be with your prospective client. Hey, when are we going to see you back? What was your favorite part? Finding out those informations, and then having the certainty as that individual that's the coach or the front desk person or the owner to walk them through and say, hey, this is probably going to be the best fit for you. So what most people do in your situation. Does that make sense? Makes sense. Awesome. And then, help them sign up, help them change their lives, because you ever hear the law of diminishing intent?
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. So, Jim Rohn was the first person I heard that from. But so, man, like, if you let that person walk out that door and they sincerely wanted to sign up, it's not you forcing them to sign up. They walk out that door, life gets in the way. They get busy, things come up, and their aspirations and everything else get put to the back burner. And then, and I've seen it too much, having a gym for about 10 years now, where people are like, yeah, they're a member now. And I look back and they like tried a session a year ago. I was like, well, what the hell happened for a year? Oh, well, I got busy, right? And it's like, well, damn, we could have already been a year ahead of this game, right? Or like, man, one of our great fighters, he actually won Golden Gloves last year. He was a member, or he came and tried a session, and then it was like 6 months until he came back. I was like, well, what the hell was going on? It wasn't until I saw him in the parking lot of Walmart that he actually came back, joined, and then ended up winning Golden Gloves, and now he has like 8 fights. So...
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, it's very interesting how that happens. I see it in my business as well. I have people that respond to emails literally 6-7 months later, like, yeah, I'm still looking. And it's like, geez, I've had clients that have already launched their franchises. Like, you're behind the curve, and we could. That's a whole nother podcast around why people do that. But what's interesting to me about the fitness space, because I love the fitness, space, and I believe personally that fitness changes lives.
Yes.
And, a lot of people that reach out, they talk about wanting to do a business or a franchise that they're passionate in and that they believe in. And to me, fitness is one of the rare ones that, one, is highly profitable. 2, you have reoccurring revenue, but 3, you have the ability to transform people's lives in a way that few businesses can. That's because right. When someone is going in and doing these physical exercises, their spirit is changing, their mindset is changing, like their identity of who they are is changing.
That's right.
And as someone who's been an athlete all of my life and run Spartan races and all that stuff, here's what I know. If I'm working out and exercising consistently, every other area of my life is doing better.
That's
so
right.
Talk to that point. Like you've been doing this for some time now. How have you seen some of your clients change just as individuals, as who they are, and starting to work together through your program and the fitness routine?
Yeah, well, there's so many situations and instances that come to mind. Sometimes we'll get letters, from members and stuff like that about their experiences because it's touched them so much. Man, that's a hard one. You put me on the spot because there's so many. I just know that, for instance, let's say something like diet, right? So if you're eating, this, that, and the other thing, right? That's probably not the number one reason for why, as Americans, we're the most unhealthiest we've ever been. We're the most unhealthiest we've ever been because of a sedentary lifestyle. Because if you look back in the 50s, people on average were thinner, everything else, and they were still eating largely the same foods. Okay, it's really honestly not that different in my opinion. The difference is movement. But then with the movement comes, like, what type of movements are you doing? And what I've experienced with, well, actually, it comes to mind one individual that they called us up and they had experienced this is actually just the most recent one was from last week that someone told me about, that they told me about this individual, where they experienced a very traumatic situation. And they called us up pretty soon after. And they had got me on the phone. It was like from a couple years ago. And they said, and the first thing I asked them was like, are you safe now? Because it was a traumatic situation that could have still been going on. And they said, yes, I'm safe right now. And so anyway, though, that was the catalyst for them to join a boxing facility like ours, and then to completely change their standards for themselves, their level of self-respect, and then also their health. And so that's something that I find so important and powerful about this type of training with, martial arts in general, as long as they're effective martial arts, is that it completely changes your identity as a person, your self-confidence, because, not trying to slam on bodybuilders, right? I've got some friends that are bodybuilders, but if you just are a aesthetic athlete where the goal is to look amazing, and you do look amazing, there's kind of this internal, sometimes unassuredness that comes with that, or can, versus being the individual that, man, you look like you're in shape, but it's not like, oh wow, this person is just the most amazing looking aesthetic person I've ever seen in their life. But inside of them, you can see that confidence. I saw with one of she's our head coach now, Maura. She joined us when she was 30 years old. She owns a farm with her wife, and they just worked on that farm. She was an artist. She maybe played a little bit of softball in high school, and she was just the most quiet, reserved person. And then she ended up actually going on to have 5 fights, and she won a tournament in Atlanta. And I remember one day I saw her walking into the facility, like towards the facility from the parking lot, and I was like, who's that? I was like, who the hell is that? And it was just like a totally different, just the way she walked, the way she held herself was just like a completely different person. If I would have been removed from her for a year, I wouldn't have recognized her at first, just because of how she held her body, right?
Wow.
It wasn't like an aesthetic change. It was, like you're saying, almost like a spiritual or internal change of confidence, of assuredness, of personal power. And, of course, the definition of power is the ability to act, right? And so that's what's beautiful about things like combat sports, is it gives you that ability in situations to act. Yeah, you might not be the best at it, but you have more than what you had when you started. And again, the last the other reach out I had recently was an individual. You build close bonds with people, right? They go through tough times. They let you know it's really this amazing family. And I'll tell you one thing, Tariq, as well, that I found so beautiful is that when I was boxing and I was by myself, just with my father coaching me and whatnot, no friends, no girlfriend, I was becoming very isolated. And when you become isolated, you become very judgmental of people that you don't relate with a lot. And through the process of having a business like this, and through working with such a diverse group of people, whether it's on our team, our actual staff, or clients, it's been remarkable how we've had people from both ends and any area of the political spectrum, religious spectrum, all of it, literally, personally say to me and other team members that this is their safe place. This is the place where they can feel at home, safe, and that comfort. And it's so awesome to have people that I would never associate with, maybe casually, but them be actual people I get to know on a personal level and have great respect for as human beings. And it really just brings us down to our core essence as people. And that's what physical exercise does, but also, done in a, fashion like we do it. It's so beautiful and powerful. And I never would have expected going into it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm a true believer of that as well. And I can, although I've never boxed, I can appreciate it from the outside because I wrestled for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's similar in the sense where it's a solo sport, right? Where you can't no hating on football or basketball. I mean, I love both. But you can lose because your teammate dropped a pass or missed a shot, right, or whatever it is. Like, in a solo sport, you have no one to blame, and you really have to just look in the mirror. But I'm curious, man. I know that when we first connected, you shared a little bit about your story and how you've grown. Do you mind sharing a little bit about where you were, who you were, and how your journey of both boxing and entrepreneurship has changed you?
Yeah. No, absolutely, yeah. So, I grew up in Athens, Georgia, on about 40 acres, because I was blessed to grow up, middle class or upper middle class, because my father's a PhD in neuroscience, clinical psychologist, and I got bit by ticks all the time. And it was just this thing. I never got a bullseye rash or anything like that. But then in the 6th grade, my mom said, like one summer, I said, like, oh, I feel weird or something. And so she just kind of remembered that. And so then it was like kind of over the course of the next 5 years from that, I started to lose weight. I'm about 170 pounds now at 5'8". I got down to about 125 pounds. I had carpal tunnel in both my wrists. I was having muscle spasms. I was, having to sleep all the time, no short-term memory. I had gotten into maybe it was ways to self-medicate, maybe it wasn't, but smoking a pack a day of cigarettes, smoking, weed almost every day, and drinking 3 or so days a week, and skipping school and everything else, to the point where I missed so much school that I would probably be in school until I was 20 years old. So I needed to get a GED. And it wasn't until I'd already, essentially dropped out and got a GED, and I was 17 years old, that my mom was searching on Lyme. This was about 2003 or so. And she was like, let's get you a test for Lyme disease, because I kind of fit into this crazy laundry list of symptoms. We'd already tried psychotropic medication because I was experiencing anxiety and all these other things. And so got the test back. It came back positive. And that was such a great pivotal moment for me, because I realized that it wasn't me. It wasn't that I am a weakling or I am a loser. It was because I was truly battling something that I thought I was, but I wasn't sure of. And when we're honest with ourselves, we self-evaluate and we make sure that we're not making excuses. And I kept on thinking I was making excuses and trying to battle those excuses, but kept on getting thrown back to bottom. And so I was like, am I really that flawed as a person? And during that time, I hung out with crazy individuals like travelers and stuff like that. And I panhandled on the streets and stuff like that, just crazy stuff. So I started my course of treatment. And so at that time, it was like, okay, well, what's the field of diamonds in my own backyard to change myself, to change my life? And that's combat sports, that's boxing, because my father being a coach. And so I started getting into that while being treated with antibiotics. And so that was, me getting the hell beat out of me a lot, and ups and downs with the different reactions you can have from treatment. But it forced me to stop smoking cigarettes. It forced me to stop smoking weed, because you can't live like that. It's like Forrest Griffin, who's a UFC champion, who's from Athens, Georgia, trained with my father and Rory and Adam Singer here. He said, I remember in his own funny way, how he's like, yeah, it's easy to train hard when you're going in to get beat the hell out of by somebody, right? It's like, that's good easy motivation. So that was just the perfect avenue for me, because I knew that I was not the man I wanted to be. And so that led me to a certain level with that. But the challenge with that, Tariq, and what I see with athletes, and I preach to our athletes, is that you develop this whole kind of very rigid identity of, I'm a fighter, I'm this. And there's a lot of benefits to that. But you have to let the characteristics of a champion, which I was never a champion, but the characteristics I was attempting to develop, you have to bring those into other areas of your life. I remember having a conversation with one of our fighters who's 16 years old right now. And I said that, hey, Harold, you need to develop the skills that you can be a champion in boxing at the amateur level, or be a champion in anything you do, not just the skills required to be a boxing champion. You need those broader skills of character, of discipline, of consistency, that are going to take you to success with anything you do. If you only develop them in a narrow avenue, you're going to be very sorry you did. And so I largely developed mine in a narrow avenue. But during that course, though, because of me having so much health problems, there were times, Tariq, where I couldn't throw a punch for a month. And so all I could train was defense and footwork, because of having joint issues and everything else. I got into the personal development. I got into, Earl Nightingale, which was my father's favorite. And then, Think and Grow Rich and things like that. And started really making a study of those things to help me just get the most juice I could out of what I had. And then, 2010, it all ended when I got a neck injury in Mexico, and then got into, coaching and training and starting a business. And during that course of business ownership, I had honestly finally found the avenue which was the most impartial pathway to success, meaning that, I started off as a musician, And with that, there's a lot of subjectivity with art, right? Because, what you think is great music, I might think sucks, right? And vice versa. And so there's a lot of subjectivity. And so I want to be the best I could be with music, but I'm like, man, it's just too darn subjective. And then I was like, well, boxing is like, it's like I either knock you out or you knock me out, or it's like, it's pretty obvious who's the winner here. But then with that, there's a lot of subjectivity as well. And then also there's your own limitations with your own body, right? And things like that. But then that's where I found business to be the least subjective, because, there are some pretty clear metrics of success. And but then there's enough creativity and enough freedom in that to express your own artistic abilities and everything else, which is an area that I have in myself. And that's what's funny is one thing is the whole reformation of myself is I used to be this complete artistic type person. And it's been this course of like killing the artist in me so that I can bring myself to this perfect place where I'm not like off in the woods zoning out and or just being like a type A like control freak. So
yeah, interesting. Well, but business is an art. I mean, there is an art to business. So, in many ways, you get to express your art just probably in a different way through business and your creativity. I mean, just looking at your YouTube channel, no wonder why your YouTube channel is so good. Is that because you're a creative person, right? So, because I was like, man, who does your editing? You're like, I do. I was like, oh wow, that's amazing. That's what's cool about business ownership, right? Though, is that it demands so much of you, right? And as I'm sure you experience this, being a franchisee as well. It's not just with people that just own their own operations that aren't a part of a franchise. Is that you really have to expand your threshold. You have to develop new skills that you didn't have before and weren't comfortable. Okay, like I wasn't comfortable selling at all. I hated selling. I thought selling was horrible. And I thought people that sold were horrible people. And I literally had to shift that and realize like, okay, there's quality salespeople and there's crappy salespeople. So, it's just, so that's, isn't that the journey though you experienced too with business ownership? Oh yeah. I mean, my belief is that, entrepreneurship is 80% mental and 20% strategy. Right. Absolutely. And, I kind of get some of that from Tony Robbins, but because at the end of the day, like you could have the strategy for a business, you could know exactly what to do. It's like people that reach out to me that, hey, I'm miserable in my job. I want to own a franchise. And then they're just, they're not able to move forward because they're so scared. Like the answer is right in front of them. Like you just got to take the next step, the leap. Strategy's right there. But because of fear and procrastination and doubt and not believing in yourself, if you can't get yourself to actually implement and do it, well, you're not going to be successful. And the reality is, in order to build a business, as I'm sure you experience every day and have a lot, you are constantly, every single day, having to get out of your comfort zone, deal with fears, insecurities, doubts, and it's your ability to show up and do that every single day that will eventually get you to your destination.
Well, and that's where the thing that really helped shift my mindset on all that, and mindset's kind of an overused word, but I know you know what I mean, is that, like, it's a question for anyone listening, is like, if you want to start a franchise, if you want to maybe create your business into a franchise or buy into a franchise or whatever, and you're hesitating, like you're saying, the thing is when you look around, you look closely, have you ever seen someone more successful than yourself and been like, man, I'm smarter than that person? Or man, that person's not that smart. And you're a little critical of them, right? And it's like, well, that's your sign right there that you have a problem, and your problem is execution, or also maybe they're actually smarter than you think they are because they've also been further down the road than you are, right? And so that's one concept too, is that like no one's better than you, they're just more experienced than you, right? And so that's something I experienced because, me being in a college town, I felt like I was not as worthy or not as good because I didn't have a college degree. But then now I'm at this position where I realize the advantages and the sometimes disadvantages, but honestly, it's all just the advantages of I wasn't strapped with all this debt, right? So I have all this ability, and then everything I know is completely practical. right? It's pretty darn practical. But so that's one thing, is that if you ever see anyone more successful than you and you think, man, I'm smarter than that person, well, you know what your problem is? You don't just pull the darn trigger, and you got to just pull the trigger. You got to shoot, you got to go. And I see this, and this is where like combat sports is a great example of this. I have had and sometimes have great fighters that are great technically, great condition, everything else. But when they get into the fight and it's time to go, they don't pull the trigger, and they don't pull the trigger often enough. And so that's been a lesson, because I experienced that too from time to time in boxing. So that's been the lesson for me that I've taken to business, is it's like, dude, if you don't just pull the trigger, you don't even know if it works or not, right? It's like you can't design the perfect product because you haven't even launched the product yet to find out what is perfection. Perfection is not what you judge it to be, and if you think you know what perfection is, you're kind of an egotist, because you're acting like you know what everyone else wants, exactly what they want and the future, and you don't know that, right? And then last one is that the anyone that works a job or has a profession is that, and you feel like the higher ups are stupid or whatever, is that, remember, that is the price you pay for not being a leader, right? Is to be led by people who are inferior to yourself. If that's the case, right? If they are actually, dumber than you and everything else. And sometimes that is the case. There's that thing of the Peter principle, right? You're familiar with that. You get promoted to your level of incompetency. So if you ever have those thoughts, I challenge those people, man, that step up. You only got one life to live. And at the end of your life, let's live with, fulfillment and not regret that we didn't take action. Because I would say it's not the things you did in your life, but things you didn't do that you're going to be most sorry about at the end, probably. So we'll see at the end of mine.
Ooh, that's so deep. You mentioned something there which I can relate to so much, which is, okay, so oftentimes the smartest person in the room is the one that is not as successful, because they're so smart, they figure out all the reasons why it's not going to work.
That's right.
All the reasons why it's not going to work. And when it's so interesting, because I look back at, I try to compare me as an entrepreneur, in my business career over the last however many years, to being an athlete and being a wrestler. And I use that as my metric. And I look back, I sucked at wrestling in the beginning. I was so bad. And eventually I got pretty good at it. But still, actually a few weeks ago, I was going back watching old wrestling tapes, and I'm looking at it, and it hurt me to watch, because even my last 2 years of finishing 97-9, I still am watching myself going, wow, I didn't believe in myself in terms of as an athlete. And I was scared to pull the trigger because I wasn't trusting myself in my abilities to pull the trigger and to be able to respond to the adversity. And I see it, and I'm sure you see it too, talking to prospective franchise owners. I see it with people that I coach or people that reach out to me, where they're so scared to just jump, to just make a decision and invest in the business or buy the business or quit their job, because they're scared to pull the trigger. And what it comes down to is not trusting themselves.
That's right. That's right. And the only way to trust yourself, I would say, is to put yourself in those situations, right? Because if you have every situation easy and there's no challenges, like, one, you're not going to be very strong, but two is you're never going to have to foster trust in yourself. And I think that's unfortunately sometimes what happens in our first world, and that's why, again, when I went to Mexico, coming back, I was like, I need to take the mindset of the people that immigrate to this country and that trusting mindset they have of like, dude, they already know what like complete failure looks like, right? They either come from it or it was right around them. And so, I think, as Americans, as people in the first world, we need to really realize that, hey, like if you end up on the darn street and you sleep in your car, that doesn't mean that's the end game. Right? It's not a zero-sum game, right? It's not like, oh, all the chips are gone off the table and it's done, it's over, right? And that's what's so beautiful. And that's where I think my creative mind plugs in, is that, man, out of nothing you can create something, right? And I think that's the trust part. But like you're saying, you can't do those things unless you start to trust. But I would say as well that you got to force yourself into tough situations in order to develop that trust, right? Because I would say your experience with wrestling and everything else and some of the things you've been through, and again, taking your franchise locations, the two that you had, and build them up, that built tremendous trust within yourself that now you can take that to other situations. And it's this whole stacking thing, right? And that's where, again, like with us taking over this other corporate location, that's something a few years ago, we didn't trust ourselves enough to do that, right? But that it's like, because of everything we've done preparing for that. And that's the one thing, that I don't know if it was Seneca or who it was, about the luck, right? Definition of luck. Familiar with that one, Tariq?
Oh, yeah.
Yep. When preparedness meets opportunity, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And that's something I preach to, our team, our fighters, franchisees, and prospective franchisees, is that, man, it's like you can have the most amazing situation come across your door, but if you're not prepared, meaning like you trust yourself and you've done that hard work, and also just prepared like you've done your darn homework, it's going to make a fool out of you. And then also though too, the contrast to that is that you can prepare, but never step out onto the mat or into the ring or into the arena. And you'll never get a chance to be lucky. And I see too many people, they'll see that, right? With like economy and everything else. That's something that's been a big change for me because, in 08, I thought everything was going to be dead. I thought, I bought gold. I thought that everything was over. And it's like, well, now here we are over 10 years later, and it wasn't. And if I wouldn't have just sucked it up and started doing what I did, I would be in the exact same place I was then. And I see way too many people do that. They'll be like, okay, it looks like the weather's perfect. So they go outside and then a thunderstorm comes and they'll run back inside and stay inside for the next 2 months. And it's like, dude, you just need to stay out there and keep walking, because that other person that stayed and walked through the thunderstorm, they're way further than you are. Sure, they're wet as hell and they're a little bit dirty, but they're way further.
100% agree. And you keep hearing now the R word being thrown around, recession, right? And so we're, it's June 1st, 2022 as the day that we're actually recording this. And I've had some people recently talking to some, prospective clients coming on board to work with my team. And they're like, well, but, with everything happening in the economy, should I start a business right now? I'm like, 100% yes.
That's right.
Like, actually, some of the greatest businesses are created during recessions or depressions. And the reality is those times weed out the weak businesses and the ones that are not executing well. And it's an opportunity for you to come in and capture the marketplace, really. So now's a great time to start a business, to buy a business. If you're waiting for the right time or the perfect time, as you were alluding to, it never comes. And
That's
it's
right.
just like when people see the stock market's tanking and they go, I'm going to wait. Whereas it's the reverse mindset. That's the time to jump in. You ride it out. Instead, people start jumping in once the ship has already sailed.
Yeah. And something too is like the perfect time is only revealed in hindsight. It's only revealed in hindsight, right? And then there's other factors in there, which is obviously what individuals did during those times, right? Because during the most perfect times, you still have failures, you still have bankruptcies, you still have people that screw it all up, right? And but yeah, you never know it's the perfect time until it's already passed. And so then what are you going to do about it? Right. And like you're talking about, just take the world of franchising. There are so many franchises that got started in 08 that are now massively successful. Man, if I would have been ready to start a franchise in 08, I would be crushing it now. So it's like you must do these things, and it's really helpful. That's where here we go. I think this is a Tony Robbins thing. It might be, but it's probably someone else's thing too. But if you ever question yourself with these things and lacking trust with yourself, just see and think and research if there's anyone that is doing what you want to do that started from a lower place than yourself, right? Or started during a bad time like you're talking about. And when you do your research, you'll find out that the greatest entrepreneurs, the greatest businesses, and the greatest business owners, and the greatest opportunities were always created, always built during times of struggle or went through times of struggle. It's like we have the greatest inflation we've had in 40 years, all right? But look at the companies that got started 40 years ago that are now crushing it, or the companies that went through those times and adjusted and still were massively successful. So yeah, it's really a phenomenal thing.
Yeah, for sure. Keith, who's an ideal candidate for for your franchise? Are you seeing people that are like huge, like massively experienced in the boxing space, or like what's an ideal candidate for you guys?
That's a great question. So just like with any other franchise concept, or largely another franchise concept, if we were a restaurant, we wouldn't be looking for chefs to operate the franchise, right? So same thing with this, and that's one of the biggest misunderstandings and biggest things that I have to work with, and as a company we have to work to educate, is that what we are looking for are individuals that have professionalism and the right character traits. They don't need to have, really honestly, much if any boxing experience, but what they need to be able to do is follow a recipe, right? And to be growth oriented, right? To have a growth mindset and being good learners. And that's where we have found on a location level, our greatest coaches are those types of people. And then same thing on the franchise level as well. And again, with myself, that's where I know my biggest successes have come as well, have not been from my knowledge in boxing, but from my willingness and eagerness to learn and grow. And that's where with a franchise, we believe that you should get the coaching that you need to and the support and the systems to do that. And that's what we look to provide, and to provide not things just because, but because they work.
Yeah. Boom. I love it. So in closing, where can people find you and where can they follow you if they want to learn more about Keppner Boxing, 2, if they just want to keep in touch with you and see what you're up to?
Yeah. So Instagram, Coach Keith Keppner is great. Can pop on LinkedIn. That's where I think you and I first probably crossed paths, perhaps. And those are probably the best avenues. Also, check out the YouTube channel, Keppner Boxing. I think it's called Keppner Boxing Athens right now, but has about 3,500 subscribers, and that's a great resource to check out some boxing technique. We also have a franchise channel as well. And can always shoot us an email at franchise@keppnerboxing.com. And that's one thing too, is that, I just, throughout my course of business, I've always leaned on the service. There's, two sides. There's the service side. There's the making money side, the profit side. And I've always leaned on the service side. And so that's where I find a lot of times when I'm on these phone calls with individuals, sometimes, even if they're not looking at our brand or really want to do our brand, or maybe they're looking to do their own concept, I'm always happy to give advice and help people that were in the same position where I was, and, they got help just like I did.
That's awesome, man. Well, I enjoyed it a lot. Thanks for coming on, and look forward to the next one, man. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you, brother.
Absolutely.